All right, folks, good afternoon. It's a couple minutes past 1 o'clock here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass IT Compliance. I'll be moderating today's webinar where we'll be discussing Think You're Immune from Being Hacked, Not So Fast. We'll cover some different topics in terms of how hacking has evolved and changed over the years and what the current threat landscape looks like. Just some quick housekeeping notes before I turn the presentation over to Adam to begin. We've muted everybody's lines just to make sure that there's no interruptions that arise as a part of the different background noise so Adam doesn't get distracted and start talking about other things. I'm just kidding. But if you do have questions, there is a chat function on the bottom of the screen. You can direct them to me. Again, my name is Jeff with a G, so don't look for a J. And we can answer those at the end. We'll have some time blocked off for a Q&A session. So I'm going to introduce Adam now to get things rolling here. Adam Cravedi is our VP of Information Security Practice here at Compass IP Compliance and is one of our founding partners as well. He's been with Compass since the beginning. This is a presentation that we actually gave, or Adam gave, I should say, at a healthcare conference down in Florida that got some great reviews in terms of what does the current threat landscape look like, how have these threats changed, particularly recently with some of the different rises in phishing and ransomware and all that type of stuff. So Adam's going to cover a lot of great details. If time permits at the end, we'll also be doing, or he'll be doing rather, a brief demo of some different tools that can be used that these organizations and hackers would use to gather sensitive information about you to ultimately use that down the road to gain access to your systems. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Adam. Adam, take it away, man.
Thank you, Jeff. So, as Jeff said, my name is Adam, and I'm the VP of Information Security Practice at Compass IT Compliance. I am a certified information systems security professional and a certified information systems auditor, along with a whole bunch of other credentials that I've worked hard to gather. So, basically, today we're going to be talking about what is hacking. Like Jeff said, we'll compare a little bit of what we did yesterday for hacking and what we're doing today for hacking. Not that we've replaced what we've the tried and true methods of hacking, but we're enhancing them today and making things a whole heck of a lot easier and making security a really more difficult task. We'll focus a little bit on some phishing and ransomware attacks, and then hopefully give you some helpful hints as to how to prevent these new scale of attacks that are coming at us. As Jeff said, if time permits, I'm going to demonstrate a tool that we use to gather information about an organization as we're preparing an attack, obviously as a tester. And then we also might have some time for questions and answers. So getting moving here, first of all, if you haven't heard of hacking, what we're trying to do is gain unauthorized access to a computer system with the goals of trying to steal information or collect information or steal money about organizations to use in additional attacks. Traditionally, we've had two types of attackers: opportunity hackers, who find an opening and just go for it. They don't work very hard. Most of those are the ones that sit there and run automated scans and looking for openings in different networks. We also have brute force attackers who specifically target an organization or an individual with some malicious goal in mind, either destroying reputation, again, trying to steal money or sensitive information. An additional attack vector for hackers are denial of service, where we prevent networks or systems from operating properly, which can also result in stealing information or stealing money, or in some cases distracting the security professionals at an organization trying to restore services while we sneak in the back door and then steal money from a different avenue. The goal here is to not be detected, remain hidden until we get the information or the money or whatever that we're looking for at the right time. Traditionally, think of hackers as geeky teenagers with glasses sitting in their mother's basement, just having fun. And this is really where it all started, seeing if we could play pranks, deface websites, change things, and not necessarily for social or political reasons, just because we could. We find out if there's something out there, and then can we do it? Yes, we can. So let's go ahead and do it. And that's really was traditionally what we did. Based on this uptake in 1986, Congress passed the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which was aimed towards punishing people who maliciously attacked computers for certain reasons, specifically in the case of attacking financial institutions and trying to prevent this from happening. Over the years, it's been enhanced several times, most recently in 2008 to include identity theft enforcement and things like that. But in the long run, it's really difficult to prosecute some of these hackers, especially considering they're operating in different countries where we may or may not have extradition rights. So it was nice to have this in place, but in the long run, it really didn't work. So what did we do in the old days? Old days, I say old days, but really only in the last 10 years. Most of it was, like I mentioned, random automated port scans, where we just kick off a scan. It looks for all the IP addresses it can find on the network, and then it starts testing different ports and services. Ports such as 80 and 443, which are HTTP and HTTPS, your typical website ports, are generally open, but they're not really revealing a lot of information. So we're looking for other ports such as 22 or 23 or 21, which are SSH and Telnet and FTP, or 25, which is SMTP for mail services, and other ports that may be open, such as typical Microsoft ports, 445, and other ones that may be revealing more information about your network. RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, if that's open, that's definitely a good target. Exchange webmail services are always ports that we're looking for. And there's, if anybody knows, there's 65,534 available ports to use for both TCP and UDP. So there's a whole bunch of ports out there that could be open up to an attacker. And what these automated scans are doing are just running in, saying, here's a port, does it reply? If it replies, they pay more attention to it. If it doesn't, they move on to the next one. If you ever looked at your IPS intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems logs, or your firewall logs, you'll see these scans running all the time. We may target a specific domain and look for ports, or we may just randomly search all the ports out there. We may try and collect information about potential email addresses, or looking for general typical default accounts such as admin, administrator, Cisco, root, and try and brute force our credentials. In addition to that, we will be using any unpatched vulnerabilities that exist. As we know, vulnerabilities come out every day. SSL just released a whole slew more of patches for the OpenSSL library earlier this week. So there are patches and vulnerabilities out there all the time. If we don't keep up with patching, the hackers are looking for anything that might be accessible. Traditionally, these types of attacks are very aggressive and very loud. Like I said, you'll see these sort of things happening in your firewall and IDS, IPS logs all the time. This screenshot here is just a quick example of one tool that we use to do this type of scanning using Nmap. And you can see here we have a bunch of open ports, 21, FTP, 25, 80, 135, Microsoft, 139, another Microsoft port, 445, 1026, so on and so forth, including VNC running on 5800 and 5900. And these are the kind of things that traditionally we look for whatever might be open on the network. Today, we're doing this a little bit, we're taking this a little bit more seriously, and the hackers are not your typical teenagers anymore. They're not playing games, they're in it for big business, which means making big money. And that's the driving factor around here. A lot of it is reported by organized crime, which means there's increased competition and there's more danger. These people are serious in investing money and time into training and picking up the really smart people out there who are interested in trying to find new and exciting ways to hack computers. And in addition, we also have the nation states such as China, Middle East. The U.S. is a big player in this against the rest of the world. So don't think that we're innocent in this by any means. And our attack techniques are very sophisticated. And how are we doing this? Well, a lot of it is through phishing and other types of attacks like that, where we try to attract or try to get a user inside your network to let us in. All the defenses and security systems you have up in place on your edge, on the border, we're bypassing those today by sending these emails or sending malicious links through websites that we may have compromised, and you're basically letting us in the windows. You may have the front door and the back door locked, but your users are opening up the windows. And I use that as Windows with a capital W, by the way. Today we see a huge uptake in ransomware, which isn't necessarily trying to steal information, although more newer, more recent ransomware software also has the ability to steal files and copy files. Social engineering, again, typically through email, but also we can do this via telephone or attempting to walk into a facility that we don't have access to. Social media attacks, using all the information that people feel like they have to put out there on Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, any of the others, Flickr, you name it, we can use that information against you. We also see the existence of advanced persistent threats. Once an attacker gains a foothold inside a network, they kind of disappear, and they sit there and they siphon off information in small, tiny bits at a time in hopes of not being noticed. We'll talk a little bit about an attack like that later on. The most dangerous thing about this whole attack is that it's very quiet. It's very difficult to detect these types of attacks because most people are watching the border, but they're not watching the inside of their network. I say most, there are definitely people out there who are monitoring internal and running firewalls and other tools on the inside. You might think, oh, how about my antivirus, anti-malware software? Well, again, we'll talk about an attack that easily bypasses that. And we've seen demonstrations of different types of attacks that don't use a single piece of malicious code in order to steal information. So antivirus and anti-malware can be rendered pretty much useless at this point. Why are we doing this? Well, again, the goal is to steal money, to make money, possibly steal sensitive information, intellectual property rights, corporate espionage, competitive advantage, maybe to make you pay, in the case of ransomware in particular. So as we're talking about these, we'll get a little bit more information about what phishing, spear phishing, and whaling might be. Most people know what a phishing attack is. It's an email spoofing scheme. The goal is to get you to click a link, download some software, install it on your system. They may give us access to different things. If it's in case of ransomware, it might install a ransomware tool, encrypting all your files. In the case of gaining remote access, it might install what we call a RAT, a remote access Trojan, which gives us control of your computer. It may also just put you into a botnet, turn your computer into a zombie so that we can use it for further attacks. Spear phishing, we're targeting senior level executives here, or big fish, basically, trying to We assume, having been in the industry for a long time, most of us know that the CEOs, executives want exceptions to security. They don't always take it as seriously as the security professionals do. And the attackers know that too, so they go after the big fish, the senior level executives, assuming their security may not be the same. Again, not always the case, but definitely a possibility. Whaling, again, it's designed to look like the email comes from your senior leadership, like the CFO or the CEO, and in most cases asking for wire transfers of a lower level member or employee trying, again, to steal money. We've seen several of these attacks recently against some of the bank clients that we have. Goals, again, is to steal patient information in the case of a healthcare attack, steal money in the case of a financial institution, or personal information in cases of other organizations. Lock out your systems, make them unusable so that you have to force you to pay to unlock them, but ultimately make money at your own expense. A little Dilbert cartoon down here that just talks about having a new phishing hobby, sending fake banking emails, and of course the manager in the cartoon says, hey, this looks legit, asking for social security number and passwords, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on to ransomware, it's aimed at every organization, small and large businesses alike. Nobody's really immune to it. It tends to work. There are a lot of advances in protecting against these attacks nowadays. Law enforcement has teamed up with several antivirus, anti-malware security organizations out there, collecting keys that might be able to unlock your systems before you have to pay. And really the goal is just to make it such that there's no monetary gain anymore, but they're still chasing the attackers. And that means that we don't have all the keys. The attackers can obviously keep generating new keys and different keys and random keys and making it impossible. So it's really a losing battle. How do we get ransomware on the machine? Like we said, we use phishing or social engineering to get you to click a link, or we use compromised websites that do something called a drive-by download, where when you load the page, an invisible little link activates and the software is installed in your machine. Once the software is installed, the system starts encrypting files, folders, attached drives, backup drives. So if you have a thumb drive or a USB drive attached, that's going to get encrypted. And now we see the advent of some more sophisticated ransomware where it can potentially attack shared drives on the same network, and then start propagating itself throughout the rest of the network to encrypt all the drives that it can find. Obviously, the goal here is to make money, to make you pay. We see a rise this year alone. In the first half of 2016, ransomware attacks are up 36%. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because it's everywhere in the news these days. And we're also seeing a rise in small organizations and small institutions where malware and ransomware is up to 81% over 54% of last year. And it's not just finance, not just healthcare. Higher ed still faces the most attacks, but healthcare has become a prime target, as we've seen, and we're also seeing this against some financial institutions, as well as any organization out there is susceptible to this. Obviously, the goal is still to make money. Recent news, we just probably read about the Yahoo email hack. 500 million email addresses potentially at risk here. Interesting thing about this hack is that it started in 2014, and we're just hearing about it now. Hopefully, you've all changed your email passwords since 2014. If you haven't, I would do that now. And if you're like most of us, you probably use the same password for several different websites or several different email solutions you should change all of those. Even if you didn't get notice from Yahoo that your account might have been susceptible, it's time to change your passwords if you haven't done it in a while. Also recently, we've seen a new Apple Store phishing attack. It's trying to trick you into filling in a form for a refund for something you didn't buy. Well, you didn't buy it, and nobody else bought it either. And you'll see, I'm going to show an example of what this form looks like. They're asking for every piece of information you may possibly have used to purchase something from Apple. In addition to ransomware, there's also the existence of all kinds of new Trojans out there that are being propagated through phishing attacks. There's a new version of the iSpy Trojan out there that can actually steal your software licenses. That's right, Microsoft, Adobe, you name it, it can steal your licenses. In addition to that, those of you who were at the healthcare conference that we spoke at, we did a phishing test against the attendees, and I have the results of that as well. So the Apple Store phishing attack. They're going to ask for things like date of birth. They ask for your mother's maiden name, your bank name, routing and account number for your bank, your credit card number, the expiration date, and the CVV code. Here's an example of the form. I'm not sure how that looks on everyone's screen, but you can see under the transaction cancellation form all the fields that they're asking, and they're all required, by the way. They all have the asterisk in front of it, so you can't complete the form without filling everything in. And if you look at the top, it does look pretty legitimate based on if you've ever been on any of Apple's sites for transactions or trying to cancel a transaction. I'd say this looks pretty legitimate, although Apple does not ask for all that information typically. The new version of the iSpy Trojan is actually working on something new to the industry called Trojan as a Service. So they rent out their Trojan for about as little as $25 a month, depending on what features you want added. It costs more for all the features, of course. But now you don't even have to create your own Trojan. Now you can just lease it for somebody else. They're using what we call the dark web to do all these transactions. And you don't even have to work that hard. It's delivered via phishing. It's as a malicious attachment, which means you have to get people to click the link, and then it's downloaded. It easily kills antivirus software on the workstation, just makes it look like it's running, but it's in fact not running at all. It has all these features and acts primarily as a keylogger, so it logs all of the keystrokes. It can steal credentials. It can take screenshots of what you have on your screen. It can operate your webcam, so it can see what you're doing and where you are. It can monitor the clipboard by anything that you copy and paste onto the clipboard. It can steal, and it can also download files from your computer. In addition to that, it also has the ability to steal your software licenses. So any keys, license keys that you have in the system, it can go ahead and grab those. Not your friendliest version, not your friendliest Trojan out there. As I said earlier, we did perform a phishing test against the attendees of one of the conferences that we attended, with permission, of course. We did not do this without permission, and only in the guise of trying to see what we could collect out there. So we did send an email out to 436 different individual email addresses. We did get a total of 182 clicks and 67 unique users who clicked on the link. And we also had, from the tracking software, had trouble tracking all of them, so we had 65 unknown clicks as well, for a total of 130 clicks, unique clicks. And the unknown clicks are from people copying the URL out of the email and pasting it into their own browser, so it kind of breaks the link between phishing attack and the test. But 130 out of 436, about 25%, maybe a little bit more. So it's still good. It's still too many clicking. We also had a form attached to this asking for some information, phone number, email address, and a survey question about why they were attending the conference. We only had 8 people complete the form, but we were able to collect some phone numbers that we may or may not have had before. So this comic here talks about the weaknesses that we're exploiting in the new version of hacking. In one corner on the left, we have all of our data security: routers, firewalls, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems, you name it, it's over there. But in the right corner, we have Dave, and this is who we're attacking. We're not trying to only go after vulnerabilities, open ports, and things like that, which we're still using and is still very useful. We're actually trying to get Dave to open it up, like I said, open up the window for us and let us crawl in. And now we're inside, and if you're not paying attention to the inside of your network, we can pretty much pivot anywhere we want. Recently, I saw a demonstration about an attack that used phishing to get a link into the machine and then used normal software running on a machine to elevate privileges using PowerShell to an admin level account, and then using an FTP application that was on the machine and WinZip, or I think they used, I think it was WinZip. They encrypted or compressed application files or data files they wanted and then moved them off the machine, none of which was flagged as malware by the antivirus software, because it wasn't. It was all legitimate software running on the machine. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're facing today as security experts, and that's what the hackers are trying to do to us. We talked about all this. We don't want to scare our users into not using their computers, but we want to be able to educate them into how to recognize the different threats that are out there. Because the social engineering and phishing attacks they're trying to take our human nature and turn it against us, basically. And we want people to be alert and be aware and question activity that doesn't look normal. But of course, we have to know what normal is first. So in this case, we're talking about just being subject to all kinds of attacks. And there's no one's really safe if we're connected to the network. So how do we prevent this? Well, I have a few tips here, not too many. But the first one is security awareness training. Since we're attacking people now, hackers are attacking people, the people need to be educated. They need to know what happens. They need to know what the risks, threats are. So we need to do this. Most organizations, or a lot of the organizations, have requirements to conduct at least annually security awareness training. But my stance is it should be more often. Next month, October, is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, in case you didn't know. Compass will be putting up some content on a weekly basis for some security awareness training and other tips and tricks and videos and webinars and things like that. Other organizations out there, such as SANS, have a whole series of information that they're going to be putting up there as well. So now's the time to go back to your organizations and say, hey, we should be paying attention to this, and let's get our people involved in some of these programs. If you need some advice or tips and tricks on how to conduct some successful security awareness training, feel free to reach out to us. We do it all the time for organizations. We're happy to help. Make sure you're keeping your operating systems and applications and firmware patched. I mean, sure, I talked about attackers kind of bypassing this, but we still can't leave everything unlocked either. So, patching still remains important. Firmware and applications, they need to be kept secure as well. Again, There are ways around antivirus and anti-malware. Most attacks today are bypassing these pretty easily, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't have them. They should be installed. They should be working because it's going to prevent the easy ones. We've seen recently some attacks against what we call the Internet of Things, IoT, which are devices other than computers, tablets, smartphones, and the like connected to networks such as your smart TV or medical devices or refrigerators even, or coffee makers, or HVAC systems that are connected to the internet running some firmware operating systems that are subject to attacks of a old nature. There was an article I read about a hospital that had their medical devices network attacked by a really old worm. I can't remember the name of the worm off the top of my head. It might have been the Nimda worm, or it wasn't the love bug worm. So, anyways, it was a worm that wasn't affecting Windows 7 or Windows 10 machines because it was too old. But these devices were running a really old operating system, similar to XP, and these worms were able to take control of that network. And then because they weren't segmenting the network properly and using proper internal security, they were able to pivot off of that into the health information network and steal patient information. So we can't forget about antivirus and anti-malware just because the hackers today are bypassing it. We're seeing an uptick in the interest for security such as application whitelisting, which should be considered today because of the way these ransomware and phishing attacks work. If we can't execute an application, then they can't get installed, and we're less susceptible to these types of attacks. In addition to application whitelisting, we're also seeing the advent of sorry, I just went blank. Behavioral analytics, learning software for detecting malicious attacks. This type of software that detects abnormal activity on your computer is the only solution I've seen that can prevent the example of a hack that doesn't use any malicious software whatsoever. The one that uses PowerShell to elevate permissions and normal applications to exfiltrate data. So that's something worth considering today as well. These are not panaceas, right? Nothing is perfect. Nothing's going to prevent a determined hacker from stealing the information they want, but they definitely can help safeguard against the typical attacks and the majority of attacks. They're not easy to implement. Application whitelisting takes a lot of effort to tune and get right, and then you have to deal with new applications coming on and how you're going to handle those. And the behavioral analytics type of software, it needs to know what's normal activity. So it takes some time to tune it and train it and get it working properly. But these are the new advances that we're seeing in security to fight against the new advances we're seeing in hacking. There's a big one, and this one's pretty easy. Manage the use of privileged accounts. This means don't give people admin rights that don't need admin rights. A lot of us, including when I was an IT manager, we used to allow the local user to have local admin rights in their machine. It made it a heck of a lot easier to get things to run. Some software out there, which was poorly written, requires this access. So some pieces of the application don't work otherwise. But this is how a user who clicks on a link accidentally has permission to install software. We don't want that. We want to prevent that. So if they don't need local admin rights or admin rights at all, they shouldn't have them. If we were able to get rid of that, we would prevent most of the attacks from happening today, especially in the ransomware world. Again, use the principle of least privilege. Right? If I don't need access to a file or a folder share, then I shouldn't have access to it. If I have access across the entire network to all the shares and I get attacked by ransomware, then I have the potential of encrypting all of those files across the entire network and preventing everybody from accessing them. And if that happens, it's more likely that as an organization, I might have to pay to decrypt those files. And we don't want that. In addition to an additional step for protecting against ransomware is back up your data regularly. Test your backups, test your restores. However, nowadays we're using disk-based backups, right? And a lot of our backups are stored online, locally. Well, we can't do that. We have to store our backups off-site and off the network in order to defeat ransomware. So we can go back to what we know is a clean, unencrypted restore point. Okay, now I have time to take some questions.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Guys, if there's any additional questions that anybody has, feel free to put them in that chat box at the bottom. Again, direct them towards me, Jeff with a G. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but it just worked out that way. So, Adam, a couple questions that we have here. You talked a little bit about security awareness training as being a good tool to use. Most people, when they kind of go through that training, it's kind of that yearly check the box type thing, right? So is there a specific method that organizations should use to roll out security awareness training? I mean, it's tough to kind of convince folks to do it more than once a year, but what would be the recommendation around that? And that's a good question, so we'll start there.
Well, yes. So the requirement in most cases is to do it once a year, upon hire and annually. Now, that it certainly meets the compliance requirement. However, if we're not keeping people engaged and reminded of security on an ongoing basis, it's kind of one of those things that I don't do it every day, so if I don't know it, I forget it. We've seen techniques such as monthly newsletters, going out with a security corner, right? It's just a little part of the newsletter will have a little security tip. If you're using an intranet, you might have a tip of the day, tip of the week, tip of the month type of area where you can post a quick little blurb about information security. There's a few computer-based training type of organizations out there that have these sort of things that are available. Pretty quick, short messages. SANS Securing the Human is one that have like 7-minute videos that they're not free, of course, from SANS, but it's an excellent program. I know a few of the financial institutions that I spoke to last month or earlier this month are using KnowBe4 for phishing security and other things, and they have some training that goes along with that. So it's really just a matter of finding a way to deliver a message to your organization. It doesn't have to be a formal 45-minute security awareness class. It could just be a quick 5-minute PowerPoint or a little article posted in the newsletter or on your intranet. It could be subscribing to one of the many security blogs out there, or RSS feeds where we're downloading some, security information about the new threats and new risks and new attacks out there, and just putting it in front of people so that it's a constant reminder, keeping them aware of what are the threats, what are the risks, what are the attacks that are out there.
Excellent points. Good, yeah, good stuff. Keeping it in front of people, I think, is a great idea because it's just a check the box type of thing. It goes away for sure. One question that we got here, this is a good one too, and it talks about what about finding the source of ransomware? And I know I can kind of answer a portion of this. We identify vulnerabilities in systems and do social engineering attacks to try and mitigate risks associated with the human element. But getting into the source of ransomware, those types of things are more on the forensic side. And we have some partners that we work with that assist in that. But I don't know if you can speak to that in terms of how difficult it is to find the source of ransomware and kind of what that process looks like.
Yeah, it is very challenging if you're trying to find the actual, we'll call it patient zero, right, for a ransomware attack. And that's if the ransomware was designed to spread throughout the network. We've seen there are two different variants of ransomware today. One is individually targeted, so it doesn't spread across the network. It'll encrypt that one machine, and then also all the shares that are connected and the drives or devices that are connected. But it doesn't spread to other computers. That one you should be able to isolate pretty easily. And then it's just getting the user to own up to the fact that they actually clicked the link. The other variant that we're seeing is the one that will spread across the network, and that one can be very difficult to A, discover, and B, to eradicate. A few examples that we've seen recently are companies that have let this ransomware into their system, hopefully have cleaned it, thought they had cleaned it, and a couple of days later, rebooting all their systems, it came back, reared its ugly head, and they were back in the same position they were. So the really only way to clean the ransomware is to restore from a good, known, clean backup everything, especially if it's spreading across the network. Really, it will take forensics and a forensics team to really discover the source of that, and there's no real, I can't really give you, there's not like a real shortcut tip I could give you to find it. Asking your users who may have clicked on a link they didn't know, checking your email logs if possible to see what kind of email came through. If you run your own Exchange server, you know all the email stays in that server's database for quite a while before it gets deleted, even if users delete it off of Outlook. So that email is there, but searching through that database isn't the easiest thing to do in the world. But so there's no real easy shortcut trip if it's one of those ransomwares that spread throughout the network.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Good question. Good answer. I actually had a client of mine that I won't name go through this process, and ultimately, I think they told me they spent upwards of $40,000 to rectify the situation, and they found that really, and we'll advocate this by any stretch, but paying the ransom turned out to be the fastest and quickest resolution. So it can really be a very costly endeavor and experience for an organization to go through. So finding that source can be a challenge, but if you can, it can points back to user and their behavior in terms of what they're clicking on and what their what level of security mindset they have, maybe. So one last question that we have, Adam, for now. If anybody has any additional questions, again, throw them into that chat on the bottom. You talked a little bit about backing up and making sure that those backups are offline. Can you kind of share a little bit more around that in terms of what that process looks like, and maybe for some folks that aren't familiar with that, kind of, again, just how that process works would be great.
Sure. It sounds a lot like going back to tape, right? Where we backed up the tape, we took those tapes, we sent them to Iron Mountain, and then we only used them when we needed them, or we brought them back in when their rotation was up. And that is one possible solution, although not one that I would advocate today. It's so much easier to back up the disk. It's so much faster. We can back up so much more. We're talking about a lot of virtual machines now where we're just taking snapshots. But we need to find a solution that fits into both. And it's really would be probably a two-tiered backup or multi-tiered backup solution where our primary backup on a nightly basis is going to go to disk that we're doing today. It's fast, easy, stored locally probably, but we're taking that archive of if it's snapshots or images or backup files themselves, and we're shipping them off-site somewhere where we're not connected to them in a network type of share, right? Where if I open up a drive on my computer, I can see all those files. Well, that's what's going to be encrypted if I can do that. So it's just stored off-site. There are a lot of solutions today that will do that sort of, we'll call it mirroring, for a lack of a better term, mirroring the backup drive to an off-site location. In many cases, in terms of using it as a disaster recovery type solution, where if all our backups are stored in our data center and our data center explodes, well, our backups are gone too. So we might be backing up locally for speed purposes, but then we have to be archiving that or mirroring that off-site somewhere. And that's really what we're talking about in terms of protecting against ransomware as well.
Awesome. Good stuff. One last question here. So, and I think this is probably fairly straightforward, but you're the expert, so I'll ask you. In terms of incident response planning, how should we incorporate these types of incidents? Obviously, they should be included in any type of incident response program, but how do we kind of plan for those types of things, and how do we kind of position that with our incident response team? I don't know if that really makes 100% sense, but maybe you can kind of share a little bit about that.
Well, I can tell you that in the financial sector, the FFIEC is now requiring cybersecurity incidents to be either have their own cybersecurity incident response plan or to be incorporated into the existing incident response plan. So it's not too foreign of a concept of including them. And really what I would say is have a plan for handling cybersecurity incidents such as ransomware, or hacking or breaches in terms of detection, eradication, recovery, and then prevention, right? And then reviewing your incidents. And then if you perform your regular incident response tests, such as tabletop tests, pick a cybersecurity event to go through, such as a ransomware attack, to go through the steps and see how your plan reacts to it. See what you have in your plan that handles it well, maybe what pieces you're missing because you didn't develop your plan with this in mind, and then start enhancing your plan through the after action review of your test to add the pieces that work for you. This really would depend on the organization and the structure and things like that. I can't really say there's one pure perfect way to do it. And it depends on your your incident response team as well. But definitely add a cybersecurity event into your testing for incident response and see what happens. That would be the best way to figure out what pieces are missing from your incident response plan.
Awesome. Good stuff. That makes perfect sense. Thanks, Adam. I think those are all the questions that we have at this point in time. Not sure if anybody else has any last-minute questions they want to throw in there real quick. We can get to them. Otherwise, I just want to take a quick moment here to thank Adam for his time today. Great information that I think is very beneficial to organizations of all sizes and all industries for sure. So great stuff, and thanks for taking some time out to share this information with us, Adam. I think we're going to go through a quick little demo right now, if possible, and I'll turn it back over to you, Adam, just to kind of share what you're doing here and the different things that you're looking at. So if anybody has any last-minute questions, again, feel free to throw them in that chat box in the bottom. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So I'm showing off here a piece of software that we use for information gathering called Maltego from Paterva. For some reason, that homepage is open solely. So basically, what I'm going to try and demonstrate, and I'm going to use Compass's domain for this, is how we collect email addresses for performing or conducting a phishing test if we don't have the email addresses ahead of time. Compass, if you don't know, does perform phishing tests for our clients if they're looking for that to be done. Most of the time, we'll ask for the targets directly from the company, but occasionally we may be doing a black box type of test where we don't know what the targets are. And so how do we find those? Right? You can use Google and other tools like that to search domains and hopefully find email addresses. And this tool does use Google as well, but it uses a whole bunch of other tools as well, search engines that are out there and other methods for finding email addresses. And really, email addresses is just the tip of the iceberg. For this piece of software, it can find tons of information. And so they don't call it searches, they call it transforms. So we would typically start with a domain. That would be the domain of the company. And you see here we have compassitc.com. That's Compass's domain. And we're going to click on here, right click, I should say, and it brings up a menu with transforms. And we have a bunch of different things here, and we're looking specifically for email addresses. So we're going to go down to the email addresses from domain and click on this double arrow to run all of the different transforms that are in there. And then we should start seeing some email addresses pop up. That's pretty quick, pretty easy. we're going to get rid of some of the email addresses we're not interested in. We don't even know who this email address is, but we don't want that, so we'll get rid of that one. Enom is our host name server domain name provider, so we're going to get rid of Enom as well. We don't want to be tagging them. And so the rest of them, we have myself, we have TJ, Bill, Derek, Jerry, and info at Compass ITC. So we'll collect some email addresses, and this is the start. I'm showing off here the community edition of Maltego because it runs locally on my machine and it's faster. But there's actually a pay version. This one obviously is free, but it has a limited license. And there's a bunch of other really cool transforms that you can run with the pay version that can link this out to Facebook and other social media type sites, and you get a whole bunch of more information. But I don't have those transforms here. But if I right click on here and click here, we can collect some information about these email addresses, like the Flickr account if it exists, the MySpace account, if it's tied to any other domains, PGP if we have a key, an encryption key for that, and a few other things that it'll do. So if we want to do that, and this is going to show up a whole bunch of information once it starts populating about all these email addresses. Then, of course, this gives us a bunch of information. Oop, don't know what that is. Of course, the problem with live demo is that it doesn't always work. This worked earlier. Some of them fail, but as you can see here, we're starting to collect information. So if we look at what we see here for Jerry Hughes, let's bring that up. You see some emails that are related to him. Basically, we're just starting to see information. Oh, we have a potential phone number here that could be interesting, right? This is just the tip of the iceberg for this sort of email address. A couple of other possible phone numbers for Derek. This also can validate email addresses. We see address exists, so we know it's a real email address. Let's see. I don't really know what's here, so who knows what we're going to see. But we're seeing some information. These are files that somehow we got linked to. So let's see. If we click over here, we click on that file. Oop, you probably can't see that because I'm not sharing that. Never mind. I forgot I wasn't sharing that piece. But we're seeing something. Most of this is probably benign in some cases. Some of it may not be. I can know this is Jerry because he's the president of his local soccer club. Again, Jerry. So you can see that with a couple of clicks and about 5 minutes, we've collected a whole bunch of information, some email addresses, and a whole bunch of information about those email addresses. So if we have the full version of this tool running, we can get a whole bunch of more interesting information, but I think that's probably interesting enough. We can do different things from there. Let's just show a couple other things. I want to copy that to a new graph. All right, so we'll start a new graph here. And if you're not interested in people, we might be interested in some information about the DNS and the structure of this for our infrastructure. So if we're going to attack IP addresses or devices or servers, we can do that as well. We can run a transform trying to collect information about the DNS system. And we're having errors today for some reason. You can see here, we found Compass's website. We have Dovetail. They're providing our website and hosting us, and we have Google, so we're using Google as well. We don't really want to attack those too much. So the Compass website is interesting in and of itself. We can resolve this to IP addresses to give us some IP net blocks that we might be able to attack. So we get a couple of different IP addresses here. This is basically how we would go about mapping out the architecture or infrastructure of a client that we were looking to pen test if we don't know anything about it. We could see, what other domains might be connected to these IP addresses by, again, selecting the IP addresses and going backwards, doing reverse resolution back to the domains. And that would be if we're looking for something interesting that is related to this domain, that maybe the security on Compass's network, I hope, is better than average, and we can go from there. That didn't give us any results. Like I said, I haven't done this before, but we can maybe try and get IP owner information, which would give us information about, again, related persons or email addresses to attempt to attack. This is just giving us our domain hierarchy, so that's not really helpful. And then it's just really understanding what you're trying to find and working down there. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this piece of software, but it's very useful. There's about a couple minutes left for time, so if you do, go ahead and send them in. And Jeff, if you see any questions there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff, Adam. No questions as of yet, but that's pretty powerful, especially with all the different pieces that you can kind of look at. And it all comes back to gathering information about either users or organizations, right? And this is, if I understand this correctly, Adam, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is a really an off-the-shelf type of tool that really anybody could get. Is that fair to say?
Yep, it's available from a company called Paterva.com. Like I said, the community edition is free, but very limited. There is a professional version, which is the one I recommend. It's not that expensive. Last time I checked, it was like $975 to buy, and then a $600 license fee every year after that. And then there's a bunch of people, like I said, that created a whole bunch of transforms for this. The one that's most interesting when you're dealing with people is the ones from Packet Ninja, SocialNet, and that one it helps you link out to Facebook and other things like that, and it's really kind of cool when you see it working. So,
yeah, I think we did that one down at the Florida Healthcare Conference, and my email address was linked out to several different social media sites and whatnot. And I think what's important about that is that, as you identified earlier in the presentation, is people feel the need to put a lot of information out there on, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Foursquare, all those different, avenues or different outlets. And the more you put out there, the more that's available to other people who may not have the greatest of intentions. So it was kind of, unfortunately, a little eye-opening for myself, but a good lesson, honestly. So it all comes back to the level of access of information people have to use. So it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So I'm going to wrap it up here by, first of all, Adam, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, for getting this presentation together and the demo. I think this is great stuff, and I think it definitely shows people just how things are changing and how this threat landscape continues to evolve and what that means for all of us. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Did an awesome job. A couple quick housekeeping items before we end the webinar. First and foremost is we'll be sending out a copy of the presentation to all of the folks who registered for the webinar afterwards later this afternoon. Secondly, we were recording this webinar, so we will post that on our website and our YouTube channel. So you can visit compassitc.com and then check out our resource library where we have a link to recorded webinars. And third and last piece is, as Adam mentioned earlier, Cybersecurity Awareness Month is starting on Saturday, actually, the 1st. So for the month of October, we're going to be doing a variety of different webinars and providing some different educational and informational material Webinars will be done weekly in the month of October, so we're going to do 4 of them. The first one's going to be 1 week from today on the 6th, and it's going to cover the top 5 tips that organizations can do to mitigate their risk around data theft, data loss. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. We'll be sending out some email invitations, but you can register on our website as well at compassitc.com. Thank you to everyone who took time out of their afternoon to join us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you guys in a week. Take care. Thank you.